Greetings to all. Thank you for joining us. In this video, number 2 in the series, we will cover the following topics: how to estimate the total cost of direct labor, how to identify and calculate the cost of materials included in the project to be tendered, and how to evaluate the types and prices of equipment and machinery required to carry out the industrial work. Content of the second video. Topics to be covered: identifying and evaluating direct materials, calculating direct labor hours, evaluating the type of equipment and machinery required. Topic of the third video: identifying and evaluating direct materials. In this video, the term materials includes semi-finished materials that are used to make the next product, standard materials, which are usually purchased from a catalog, fabricated materials, such as equipment and containers, which are the result of fabrication in off-site workshops. Here, the estimator must identify each of these materials and proceed to calculate their prices, delivery times, and payment terms. Identify and assess direct materials. The previous task must be completed within a limited time to ensure that the information is available in time to be included in the tender. Details of the materials required are given in the tender documents. In case of doubt, bidders have the opportunity to ask questions and request clarifications from the purchaser up to a certain number of working days before the submission of bids. Identification and evaluation of direct materials. The contracting authority's written replies to the bidder's questions and requests for clarification are communicated, as already mentioned, by means of a circular sent simultaneously to all the bidders. This circular becomes part of the tender dossier. Calculation of materials. At this stage, it is necessary to stress the importance of making an accurate calculation of the materials required. Be careful. A minimal error in the calculation of a very expensive material magnifies the error to very high values. Calculating direct labor hours. To accurately estimate the number of direct labor hours required for a construction or installation project, it is essential that the estimating and consulting team has extensive experience, skill, and attention to detail. This includes the ability to methodically plan and organize each stage of the project to define a logical sequence of execution that will result in a reliable budget. The bidder must also have historical records of time spent on similar tasks in previous projects. The above will allow you to adapt these times and to transfer them to the current estimate in order to obtain a reliable budget. Calculating direct labor hours. Summary: estimators must have reliable historical records of the consumption of man-hours, which will be necessary for the completion of each activity. Knowing the number and type of tasks in the project, it is possible to calculate mathematically the number of man-hours that will be required to complete the project, according to the performance indicated in the tables prepared and verified in previous works. Complete information on the environmental conditions in which each project will be carried out must be available to the estimators or their consultants. Calculating direct labor hours. Complete information on the conditions under which each project is developed, as mentioned in the previous paragraph, is obtained from the documentation. The information obtained during the site visit. Questions asked of the purchaser. The next step is to determine the correction factors to be applied to the total man-hours previously calculated. After estimating the direct man-hours required for each specialty and with the data on the duration of the work, the number of workers to be employed is obtained. Calculating direct labor hours. Increased costs due to overtime. Working overtime results in a significant increase in the worker's man-hour cost, which must be taken into account in the estimate. Overtime is a source of satisfaction for the employee, but it should be noted that the payment of a 50% hourly premium does not result in a 50% increase in the employee's output. On the contrary, the excessive extension of the working day has the consequence of reducing the average performance of the worker. The discrepancy between cost per hour and performance is even more striking when 100% is paid per hour. Calculating direct labor hours. In spite of the above, companies engaged in the construction and assembly of infrastructure usually work more than 8 hours a day on a regular basis, including working days and Saturdays, and occasionally even Sundays and holidays, with all or part of your personal. It should be emphasized that the employer plans these long hours for two fundamental reasons. 1. To offer an attractive remuneration to the worker, taking into account that he will only be assured of continued employment in this work and that, in addition, the workplace is usually far from his home. 2. To meet deadlines. In many cases, these are highly complex projects that require a greater number of working hours in order to be completed on time. Calculating direct labor hours. To compensate for the reduction in effective daily working time caused by operational problems, including the loss of time due to the daily mobilization and demobilization of the worker with his tools from the workshop to the site, which may be far from the workshop, or in the case of work at height, etc. Compensation for downtime while waiting for work permits, etc. Any other situation that may lead to an extension of the working day. Work with short deadlines and high fines for failing to comply. Calculating direct labor hours. Renovating or extending existing facilities on sites that need to be activated quickly, common in architectural and civil engineering. Work carried out during periods of plant shutdown. E.g., annual shutdown of an oil refinery, works that have to be carried out by specialized personnel that are not in great supply on the labor market, etc. In summary, the person responsible for the tender must calculate the frequency of overtime surcharges and communicate it to his accountant so that he can take it into account when calculating the hourly rate. Evaluating the type of equipment and machinery required. To complete this stage, the estimating team, with the advice of specialists, must define the type of equipment required for the project and then calculate its cost. Type of equipment. The term equipment includes all the earth-moving machinery, cranes, generators, welding machines, tools, furniture and its accessories, vehicles, electronic equipment, office machines, etc., used for the execution and management of a work. In order to define the type of equipment required to carry out a project, it is analyzed and examined, for example, the requirements of the document and accompanying documentation. Evaluating the type of equipment and machinery required. The information extracted from the recently analyzed identification and calculation of materials and calculation of direct man-hours, step-by-step descriptions from specialists on how to carry out the project to be quoted. The preliminary work plan of the project, which determines the time of use of each machine, vehicle, etc. The preliminary analysis defines, for example, the type and number of vehicles for the transfer and internal movement of workers and supervisors, buses, 4x4 or 4x2 trucks, supervisor vehicles, etc. Evaluating the type of equipment and machinery required. The number and type of vehicles required for general services, such as those needed to supply drinking, irrigation, and industrial water, vehicles for internal transport of materials and machinery, fuel, etc. The type of equipment needed to carry out the project, such as heavy and light machinery, mobile cranes, welding machines, power generators, etc. Topic of the third video. In the next video number 3 of this series, we will focus on the following topics: evaluating consumption and input materials, indirect labor, how to evaluate overhead costs. If these topics interest you, don't forget to subscribe. For our next video, we hope to have your support. Buy the writer's books with a 30% discount using the code 46JWX0E95HUWS. Use the Play Store redeem URL.